Tarring and feathering. Back in the historical punishments, one stands out. The hot tar sears your skin, feathers stick to your naked body, and 100 eyes watch you scream. This was tarring and feathering. It all started in 1189, when King Richard I of England needed a way to mark thieves. His order was simple: shave their heads, pour boiling pitch on them, and throw feathers on top. The shame was the point. Everyone would know what you'd done just by looking at you. But the punishment took a darker turn in colonial America. In the 1760s, angry mobs used it as their favorite weapon against British tax collectors. Strip the victim, pour black, burning tar over their skin, and throw chicken feathers all over them. The tar wouldn't just come off. It stuck to skin, burned flesh, and ripped out hair when people tried to clean it off. The most famous victim of it was John Malcolm, a British loyalist. In January 1774, a Boston mob dragged him into the freezing street. They tore off his clothes and poured hot tar over his naked body. After covering him with feathers, they beat him for hours. Then, they forced him to drink tea until he vomited. Their sick joke about the tea tax. Malcolm survived, but his skin never fully healed. Sometimes it got even worse. In 1775, a loyalist named Thomas Brown found himself tied to a tree in Georgia. The Sons of Liberty poured burning pitch over his head. It caught fire, charring 2 of his toes to stubs. While Brown screamed, they took a knife and started scalping him, peeling skin right off his skull. Not just the British suffered. In 1918, during World War I, German-American farmer John Meintz refused to buy war bonds. One night, neighbors dragged him from his home, stripped him naked, and coated him with hot, black tar. They dumped feathers on him and left him miles from home on a cold Minnesota night. His crime was just having German heritage during wartime. Women weren't spared either. In 1906, 4 married women in Pennsylvania captured their neighbor, Hattie Lowry. They smeared her face with stove polish, poured thick molasses on her head, and dumped a pillow's worth of feathers on top. One of the last known American cases happened in 1919 at the University of Maine. 2 black students, the Courtney brothers, were seized by white students, tarred, feathered, and forced to leave campus. Their only crime was their skin color, and after that, no case was recorded of tarring and feathering. Rat's cup. Consider someone is stuck, tied down, and another person places a bowl full of rats on his stomach. It might sound weird and also brain rot to you, but this was real. It happened in 1568, during the 80 Years' War, and a Dutch leader named Diederik Sonoy made it one of the cruelest punishments in history. During the punishment, they took a hungry, wild rat and placed it inside a clay bowl. Then they turned that bowl upside down and put it on top of someone's stomach, chest, or even worse, on their face or groin. The rat was trapped, but not for long. Next, they lit a fire or used hot coals to heat the back of the bowl. The rat inside went into a total panic. It didn't want to be burned alive, so it did the only thing it could. It started digging into the person's body, claws scratching, teeth tearing through skin, muscle, even bone. The rat would chew its way through whatever was in front of it, trying to escape. It was horrible, messy, and slow. The rat almost always made it out alive, but the person didn't. And that's just the first version. The second one? Even more disturbing. It happened in Chile between 1976 and 1983, when a dictator named Augusto Pinochet ruled with terror. His secret police used a method they called the rectoscope. And yes, it's exactly what you're thinking. They took a long tube and forced it inside a prisoner from behind. Then, they released a rat into that tube. The rat, once again, was trapped and scared. It began crawling forward, deep into the person, desperately trying to find a way out. It was beyond painful. And here's the sickest part. They expected the prisoner to answer questions while this was happening. They actually wanted them to talk through the pain. No one really knows how many people died from this method, because so many just disappeared during Pinochet's rule. But survivors say the fear of the rat tube was worse than death itself. That's the thing about history. Sometimes the darkest stories come from people rather than monsters. Sawing, Sawing ever seen those magic shows where someone gets sawed in half? Well, long ago. This wasn't just a trick. It was real and super scary. The saw has been around since about 3100 BCE. People made it to cut wood, but soon some mean rulers had a terrible idea. What if they used it on people who broke rules? One of the first known cases happened in ancient Persia. A powerful woman who was married to King Darius II got mad at someone and ordered them to be cut in half. Ouch! But this wasn't just something from ancient times. Even as recently as 1848, during a big fight called the Hungarian Revolution, many innocent people faced this awful punishment. How did they do it? There were different ways, and all of them were terrible. Sometimes they tied a person to a tree or pole and sawed through their middle. Other times, they squished someone between two boards to keep them still while cutting. The worst way? They would hang someone upside down and start sawing from between their legs going downward. When you're upside down, blood rushes to your head, which kept people awake longer through this horrible pain. And the sick part is, Caligula, a super crazy Roman emperor, actually enjoyed watching this while he ate dinner. And around 1453, a ruler named Mahomet the Conqueror used this punishment a lot. Once, 400 knights gave up fighting after he promised not to hurt them, but he broke his promise and had them all sawed in half anyway. Good news though, people stopped using this punishment in the 1800s. Today, saws are just for cutting wood and doing cool magic tricks where nobody gets hurt. The rack, a tool with a long wooden frame, 2 metal rollers at each end, and iron rings to tie hands and feet at each corner. Turn the handle and ropes pull to stretch the whole human body tightly until joints pop and muscles tear. That's a rack. It was 1307 when a royal official in France had this machine built. He needed a way to make prisoners to confess the crime. From there, the rack spread across Europe. Courts used it on criminals, slaves, and prisoners of war. They laid someone down, tied wrists to the top roller, ankles to the bottom. 2 men turned handles. Each click tightened ropes. Joints stretched until they cracked and muscles tore. It was all to force a confession. Truth didn't matter. Only pain counted. Over the next 2 centuries, the rack spread across Europe. Courts in Spain, Germany, and Italy all bought one. Kings and church officials set rules. Only a few turns per hour, and no death while on the rack. But rules meant little when cruelty took over. Some victims bled to death right on the frame. Others, desperate to stop the agony, confessed to crimes they never committed. Those spared from death often lived with limbs so damaged they could not move. Their muscles had stretched out of place, leaving arms and legs limp and paralyzed. And if a confession was judged a lie, more torture followed. And sometimes, that led to death too. The rack reached England by the 15th century. But its most famous case happened in the Tower of London in July 1546. Anne Askew, a 25-year-old woman named Anne Askew, faced the rack in that very tower. She had read Bible passages in secret and shared them with friends, an act called heresy under King Henry VIII. Guards burst into her home, arrested her, and carried her to the tower. There, they strapped her wrists and ankles to the rollers. They stripped her down and tied her wrists and ankles to the rack. A torturer turned the handle. Anne felt her shoulders pull from their sockets. She gasped, but would not speak. More turns followed. Her knees and elbows slipped out of place. She fainted twice. Each time, they revived her and strapped her back on the rack. All day long, she said nothing. On July 16, 1546, Anne's body was too broken to stand. She was carried in chairs to Smithfield. There, tied to stakes, they were burned alive. Anne died still holding to her faith. Today, the rack in museums is the truth of this torture. The elephant's foot. Ever felt tiny and scared, like a bug under a giant boot? That's what it was like to stand before an elephant's foot in ancient India. It all started way back around 200 BCE. Kings were always looking for new ways to scare people into obeying. Swords were too quick. Hanging was too boring. So they trained huge elephants to become living machines of fear. This punishment, also known as Gungar. By 500 CE, crushing by elephant had spread to Persia and Southeast Asia. If you skipped your taxes, stole a mango, or even whispered the wrong words, you might meet the elephant next. During this punishment, the person would be tied down flat on the ground, their hands and legs pinned so they couldn't move. A rider sat high on the elephant's back, gently guiding it with taps and whispers. With just one step, the elephant could smash a person's head like a soft tomato. Sometimes the king ordered a quick death, one big stomp and it was over. But other times, he wanted a show. The elephant would crush an arm first, then a leg, maybe a few ribs. Bones cracked like dry sticks. People screamed, blood spread across the dirt. And the worst part? The elephant was trained to go slow, making sure the person felt every single moment. One of the most famous cases happened in 1616, under the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. One morning, just because he was bored, he ordered hundreds of prisoners to be crushed. Some had stolen fruit, some had failed to pay their taxes. Even a little boy who had crossed the road at the wrong time wasn't spared. In front of the whole royal court, the elephants stomped again and again. No one dared to even blink. Jahangir just watched, pleased with his power. By the 1800s, when the British arrived in India, they finally banned this horrible punishment. But before that, for centuries, people lived with a deep fear. One small mistake, and you could find yourself staring up at a giant foot, knowing there was no way out. That fear kept everyone quiet. Everyone, be careful. Everyone, in line. If you like this video, subscribe for similar ones or join me in comments to suggest new topics.